Thank you so much, Jenna, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. Like Jenna said, this is going to be our first installment into a new series called PACES Connection Reacts. And this is where we will take um, the time to actually look into a lot of different things like conferences or current events and really look at them through a PACES lens, through a trauma-informed lens, and I think that it's important for us to do this not only because there's so much going on in the world right now that relates to PACEs, but also adding a perspective to even current events and seeing how all of these different current events, along with conferences and new science and things that are happening on the news, being able to kind of interpret them in a way that allows us to have a better understanding of PACEs science. And so today we're going to look at the Hope Summit, and which was their first annual Hope Summit. And I think that this was a great opportunity to really kind of launch our understanding of PACES science as we look at both positive and adverse childhood experiences. For me personally, it's been a bit of a struggle because I must admit that when I attended, um, I had to kind of reflect on myself and how I often put too much emphasis on adversity in my work and don't give enough focus and effort into PCEs and resilience. And so we've gathered today staff and hopefully those of you who attended the Hope Summit as well to kind of reflect on the summit and look forward to what it means for our movement, what it means for ACEs initiatives, and how we can move forward in a real way and incorporate positive childhood experiences into our existing work on ACEs. And so I have with me Allison and Natalie, who also attended the event, and we're going to really just kind of talk through our experiences. Um, and so I'll go first. Like I said, when I attended, I had to self-reflect. And so I always talk about how naturally pessimistic I am and how I really do focus most of my work on trauma and ACEs and specifically historical trauma and how systems of oppression are impacting people. And I don't give enough effort and thought, or even really being able to look at the science of positivity and hope. And so I had to kind of self reflect and think through how my work needed to have more balance and how, when I talk and when I reach out to people, and even in the events, educational events that I craft, and that I have to have a more balanced approach because when we think about the PACES movement, PCEs are really it's the next step. So as we become trauma informed, what does it mean to address trauma in a real way? It's going to be creating or crafting positive experience for people, not just children, but also adults, and that those positive experiences really help to bolster their resilience, but also to, look at it from a scientific standpoint. It is really long-term helping them to build their own resilience, to learn how to create positive experiences for themselves. And then ultimately having community support around positive experiences, even when we get into kind of the built environment. And so there's so much there. And so I thought that it was a great conference. I really love the, beyond the science aspects of it. As a psychology professor, I'm very familiar with that. I really love the personal touches and the personal stories. And so I attended, well, what I most liked about the conference had to be Reverend Daryl Armstrong. I'm doing that from memory, so I hope I got his name right. I loved his story and how he talked about the people that touched his life. And I definitely appreciated the DNA of Hope session that really was able to kind of incorporate a real understanding of the formula of positivity and how we get that across in our work in a real way. Allison or Natalie, did you guys have anything that really stood out for you as you attended the Hope Summit?
Um, I guess I just wanted to say in response and maybe like throw out a little bit of a question to audience members to respond to in the chat. And then I would love to hear what one of our guests here, Dr. Christina Bethel, and we also have Jeff Linkenbach, who did the DNA session here on the call. So I'd love to hear their responses as well as anyone's thoughts in the chat. But hearing your reflections and needing to integrate more positivity into your work, I couldn't help but think how I came to this work in the opposite way. And I'm just wondering if other people resonate, but I think this may have to do with being a Californian, but I very much had this new term called toxic positivity. Has anyone else heard that term? It's kind of a buzzword right now. And so I actually was a public speaker on the topics of kindness and gratitude. And I've written blogs in the Huffington Post, and I've spoken on stage in cities around the world on kindness and gratitude. And then I had an emotional meltdown, and I had to actually look at my ACEs, and I had to figure out how to heal. And so it's interesting for me because I'm like, how do we do the positivity work while still acknowledging that how important it is to look at the abuse and the trauma? And however, I will say, and I just want to throw that question out to anyone who relates. I came to it from the positivity side first, which had a somewhat toxic impact on my life because I was really ignoring the stuff that was hurting. However, since we changed our name, since we switched direction, I have become more hopeful about the work that we're doing. So I'm noticing an immediate impact, a positive impact on my mental health. So I'm curious to hear anyone put their response in the chat and hear from some of our other folks.
Thanks, Allison. What about you, Natalie? Natalie, you are a new staff person, and really your focus is really on PCs and resilience. So I'm interested to hear your takeaway from the conference.
Yeah, so I'm happy to share. So I come from the child abuse prevention field and public health, and I'm really excited about the HOPE framework. And as soon as I saw it, I felt like it's definitely where the field needs to be right now in a lot of ways. And I was thrilled to see all of the people at the HOPE Summit living and breathing this new paradigm shift, as Bob Sagi said it. And I also was inspired to hear about how hope is spreading. And a couple of things that I wanted to reflect on. One is that I really appreciate the overlap, and I think this happens in the ACEs field too, but it's great to see it now in the PACEs field, of so many disciplines coming together, looking at medicine, education, psychology, relational health, public health, looking at policy, research, practice. It's really not just taking it in one direction, which I really appreciate, that sort of pulling together. And I also really liked that Bob Sagi even talked about the fact that the integration of the HOPE model is actually a part of the social ecology. And he really was acknowledging that we need a lot of different models to support children and families at different levels. He talked about HOPE at the child level, the Strengthening Families framework at the family level, Help Me Grow at the community, and Essentials for Childhood at the policy and cultural. And that modeling working together and that synergy, I think, is just, also looking at ACEs, like we're pulling together a lot of pieces that I think have been in disparate places, to be honest. And so one of the things that I really love is seeing all these things coming together in PACEs. And I think one of the thoughts that Daryl Armstrong had that I just so resonated with was when he was talking about the definitions of hope and really thinking about how hope has this future orientation. Mm-hmm. And I thought of that just as such a great metaphor for the way that the field has gone. While we all need to understand and really grasp the profound impact of ACEs, just like you were saying, Allison, I absolutely agree with that. I think hope also lies in the question of what do we do with that information? And I think there have been a lot of people.
Hey, Clean. Instead of focusing on small clients or serving individual consumers.
Trajectory.
Great. Well, I want to really base a few comments I'm going to make, and I'm assuming I'll just take a couple minutes and then maybe Jeff will talk and we'll keep talking. But just to be responsive to what has already been said is that, I talk about the dual continuum of health, which is that we can flourish and have adversity at the same time. And in fact, most people who have adversity have many qualities of flourishing, which are kind of made up of meaning and purpose and participation and engagement in life, having relationships with people, positive relationships, seeking out and noticing the positive and not being afraid to immerse in positivity even in the midst of adversity is maybe one of the hardest parts, because our identity when we have adversity can get so caught up there, but we can still allow what is pleasant and what is connecting, which is often how we're connecting with other people about what's hard. So this paradox that the way we experience positivity is often about sharing what's vulnerable and difficult in a caring context, that becomes the positivity, and that they're not separate, they're actually embedded within each other, and that populations with a lot of adversity often show the most flourishing and resilience in some ways. And that doesn't mean we don't have to mitigate and eliminate what has led to that adversity in terms of social structures and racism and all of that, but the way to leverage the positive that already exists as a way to create the movement for that. So the dual continuum is really real, where people can be very sick, they have a lot of adversity, and by addressing that, by bringing our strengths to that, we actually create positive experiences. And so I think that's a dilemma, but there's also the pitfall of toxic positivity, which is, just buck up and grin and bear it, which is actually gaslighting and demoralizing and abusive. And so we are not talking about that. And that often happens where, well, they did better than you. So, well, the truth is people who look like they're doing better than someone else who have adversity had either something different happen or they're masking because we're humans and we're all humans the same. And the safe, stable, nurturing relationships and love and connection that we need biologically and to matter are built within us. And when those go awry, we suffer and have adversity. And so the solution to the prevention, the healing, and the mitigation is the same thing as it's the opposite. It is in some ways the taking away of that. And I would just say that adversity arises from a deeper knowing that something is right and something is true that didn't happen. And so underneath every adversity is what I call this finding the jewel concept, which is, if I go deep enough, why is this hard for me? Well, it's because I know what's right. I know respect and honoring and mattering and being connected to is right and good. That didn't happen. So it's experienced as a negative. And so underneath every experience of negativity and adversity and ACEs is a right and true knowing about what we want. And if we focus on that knowing, it will actually open up resources and ideas and the willingness maybe to reach out to restore that positive capacity. But oftentimes ACEs comes with a shutting down, a survival mode. And if we don't bring in the positive possibilities, it can actually lead to not really even taking up the opportunities to the healing. And we know that's a huge issue, is the not participating in what's even available to support healing and restoring that will to be well. So I'm just going to stop right there. But the policy piece, I have a whole conversation about what this means for, designing programs, paying for programs, realigning performance measurement, credentialing and criteria, making sure that we allow people who have these skills to build flourishing and positive experiences enter into the workforce, be paid, and get supported, because that's often the gap for a lot of providers is I don't have those skills, or I need someone to come in and teach me this. And those aren't necessarily licensed professionals. They can be family members. So there's a lot of policy issues that cut across, how we define care, pay for care, rewards for things. And those are very big policy issues that I can come back to a little bit more if we want to talk about it.
Yeah, and we can definitely loop back around and talk more about policy, and definitely what you